This week in Parliament, the dominant issue related to the Labour government's austerity cuts in respect of welfare reform, where they're going to impose £5 billion of cuts, largely upon disabled people and those who are claimants for PIP. One of the points I was anxious to make in that debate was that the last time we had the government, then the Tory government, make welfare reforms, the Stormont executive, ever wanting to be populist, decided that they would take money out of health, out of education and other necessary sources to make up the deficit that had arisen in welfare, and in other words, to mitigate the welfare reform. So I was wanting it on the record that if, in their wisdom or otherwise, they decided to do the same again, then once more it would be the Stormont's choice to penalise public services in general in order to prioritise welfare reform. And even on the last measures they took, we're still paying out of the block grant £47 million a year just to make up for those mitigations, and that's not something we can afford going forward. A big issue for me in relation to the welfare reform statement was there was no mention whatsoever of dealing with fraud in the system, and yet a point I was making in local radio this week was that when it comes to the Motability scheme, that's the scheme whereby someone at the upper end of PIP points because of their mobility issues is entitled to access a car which is provided by virtue of some of their benefits going towards that. And that Motability scheme, it seems to me, is being grossly abused, because the figures we discovered were these: that last year there were 39,000 new vehicles registered in Northern Ireland. A staggering 18,000 of those were under the Motability scheme. And of course, under that scheme, it's not just the disabled driver who can drive. Indeed, he or she doesn't have to be driving at all. Any three family members or others can be named drivers in respect of that scheme. So there has been abuse. There was abuse in the past, and it's continuing with the Motability scheme. Now, that's not to say that most users of that scheme are perfectly entitled and genuine and honest, but it's very clear that there are those who are abusing the scheme. And if we're going to deal with welfare excesses, then the place to start is with cutting back on the fraud and deception that's going on to claim benefits to which people are not entitled. So I was very anxious to push that point very strongly. Other issues which arose this week, we had again a useful debate on the WASPy women. That's the women from the 1950s who, without proper notice, had their pension age increased with considerable loss in terms of their expectations of being able to retire at 60, and then suddenly it was pushed first to 65 and then to 66. And those women, despite a finding of maladministration by the Ombudsman, have never been compensated. So I was pushing that again. And in the debate in the Commons about national insurance, I was strongly making the case for our hospices, which are now going to have to find the extra jobs tax money that the government has imposed through its increase in national insurance, and yet they are charities. They are those depending on the public donations, and that is right across the charity sector, and indeed right across much of the independent health sector. There's going to be this tremendous curve, including on our GPs and our dentists, this extra burden with the national insurance. So I voted against all those measures this week, and trust that it was a week well spent in terms of taking a stand on the issues that truly matter.